Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Here and Now Habit: How Mindfulness Can Help You Break Unhealthy Habits Once and for All. By Hugh G. Byrne, Ph.D. Narrated by Mike Chamberlain. Forward. I was in college, in the midst of final exams, when I first heard the phrase, "How you live today is how you live your life." My mind immediately fixated on my exhaustion after pulling an all-nighter to study, the fact that I hadn't taken a run for a week, and judgmental thoughts surrounding a recent ice cream binge. The notion that these habits reflected my life was disturbing. Yet over time, what at first seemed jarring and oppressive became empowering. The shift came in realizing that today, right in this very moment, we can deepen our attention and cultivate habits that support healing and freedom. Our habits, how we think, speak, feel, and act, directly impact our well-being. More broadly, they reinforce patterns that shape our entire experience of living. Our habits determine whether we are available to listen when our child is trying to communicate, and how well we can take care of our own bodies and minds as we age. Our habits determine whether we bring our full intelligence to what we do, and whether we are able to enjoy the beauty and mystery of the moment. If we want to live a life in which we are true to ourselves, remembering what matters most to us and expressing our natural creativity and love, we need to honestly examine our current habits. Habits are like the streams that create riverbeds. With a steady flow of water, channels become deep grooves. And yet, if the flow is redirected, rivers can be rerouted. Neuroplasticity makes this possible. The pathways in our brain, including the riverbeds of habits that affect our well-being, can be altered depending on how we direct our attention. Where attention goes, energy flows. A mindful awareness is essential in guiding the flow in ways that will help us realize our full potential. Buddhist teachings, contemporary psychology, and recent findings in neuroscience all converge on a simple principle. By bringing mindful attention to our habits of thought, feeling, speech, and action, we can transform even the most painful and limiting patterns. In order to make changes, we need to witness our habits with an engaged, non-judging presence and a tender, caring heart. From an evolutionary perspective, the capacity for mindfulness is a recent development. It emerged, along with empathy, compassion, and executive thinking skills, with the growth of our brain's frontal cortex. Without mindfulness, our habits would be entirely driven by the primitive energies of attraction, desire, and aversion, fear. Mindfulness enables us to evolve our consciousness and influence our subsequent life experience by bringing awareness to the habits that keep us from achieving our potential. With mindfulness, we can identify the impulses behind our automatic and reactive behaviors and see the way they impact our lives and the people around us. With mindfulness, we can cultivate habits that will help us fulfill our heart's deepest intentions. There are a number of fine books on strategies for changing your habits, and there is a growing literature on meditation. The book you are listening to addresses the dynamic and essential intersection of these two areas, applying mindfulness to habits. Author Hugh Byrne, a good friend and deeply respected colleague who has helped thousands of students make positive, lasting changes, is an ideal guide for investigating this terrain. In a clear and accessible style, drawing on 3 decades of meditation practice and more than 15 years of teaching mindfulness, Hugh will help you understand the most recent scientific research related to habits and introduce you to state-of-the-art strategies for supporting habit change. You'll learn skills to address addictive behaviors, barriers to intimacy, harsh self-judgment, procrastination, and other forms of self-sabotage. Most importantly, you'll discover that even the most challenging habits will transform as you bring a caring presence to your inner life. Hugh will show you how, by practicing mindfulness, you can develop a wise, healing relationship with the unmet needs that drive unhelpful habits. This will prepare the ground for you to cultivate new habits that endow every aspect of your life with more presence, joy, and ease. Remember the phrase that caught my attention in college? I now reflect on a slightly different version. How you live this moment is how you live your life. If you embrace the practices in this book, this moment becomes a place of profound possibility. In this moment, you can choose to offer a compassionate attention to unproductive, limiting habits. In this moment, you can further manifest your full capacity for love and wisdom. The Here and Now habit offers an ideal map for this journey. May it help you find meaning and freedom in your life. Tara Brach, Ph.D., author, Radical Acceptance and True Refuge. Introduction. It has been said that we teach best what we most need to learn. This has been my experience as I have studied how habits form and why they can be so hard to change, and as I have explored the role of mindfulness in changing my own unhealthy habits. I have practiced mindfulness for more than 25 years, and the benefits have been profound. Mindfulness has helped bring more peace, acceptance, and ease into my life, and it has reduced my stress and suffering. But until recently, I was still unaware of certain habits of mine. This tends to be the nature of habits. They operate under the radar, that were causing suffering. It was only as I dug into the research on habits and their power and turned the spotlight of my attention inward that I came to see certain patterns of thought and behavior that led to stress and disconnection. I noticed how, for example, in situations where I needed to wait, in stores, on the phone, in traffic, I frequently experienced unpleasant sensations of tension, tightness, and feeling confined, accompanied by the thought, I need to change this, and I responded by acting impatiently. I also became aware of a habit of putting off tasks and responsibilities that felt difficult or challenging, and only engaged with them when they became truly urgent. Though not a chronic procrastinator, I experienced low-level tension and worry about things I needed to take care of. Another personal habit I observed was a tendency toward distraction. I saw how, if I wasn't consciously being present, my attention easily went to whatever was most visible, audible, shiny, or exciting. My partner Rebecca often found this challenging. For example, when my attention would go to a new message on my iPad when we were cooking together. Perhaps my most challenging personal habit was that, when the demands and pressures of life became intense, I would get caught up in anxious, worried thinking. How am I going to get all this done? This led at times to difficult periods in which I kept thinking there was too much to do and not enough time. Bringing mindfulness to these habits and reflecting on how I had been able to let go of earlier unhealthy habits, such as smoking and overeating, showed me the power of awareness in transforming unhelpful and unwanted habits. I don't mean to say that it's a done deal and all my unhealthy habits are in the past. But I have learned, from my own experience and from working with many of my mindfulness students, that mindfulness is the best path to healthier habits and a life of greater freedom and ease. Almost all of us have developed or will develop habits that are unhealthy or don't truly serve our interests or meet our needs. We all grapple with patterns of thinking and behavior that can be hard to change. Mindful awareness can help you abandon unhealthy patterns and create new, healthier ones. Whether you overeat, smoke, think negatively, work too much, get lost in distractions like social media and TV, or are a heavy user of alcohol or other substances, The mindfulness practices in this book can help you free yourself from these patterns and heal your mind and heart. Mindfulness is not a quick fix. Anyone who suggests that changing habits is quick or easy is selling snake oil. Just as habits, both healthy and unhealthy ones, take time to form, they take time and effort to change. Mindfulness is a practice, a training of the mind that you cultivate over time with effort and determination. But, as you'll hear, mindfulness, conscious awareness of your present moment experience, is a natural antidote to unhealthy habits, which are unconscious and automatic. Mindfulness will open the way for you so that you can make choices that are more healthy and helpful. Then, once the choices you make about how to act and live align with your true interests and well-being, you can live more freely. Right now, perhaps you think that your unhealthy or unhelpful habits reflect some essential truth about who you are. When considering your unwanted habits, you may think, something is wrong with me, I'm flawed, or even, I'm a bad person. Perhaps you have tried to change your habits and concluded that you're weak or ineffective or a failure. However, unwanted habits are the result of natural processes rather than character flaws. They arise from your attempts to meet your needs. For example, your need for comfort or your need for safety or security. If a behavior you embark on in an attempt to meet a need has powerful short-term benefits, even if it has long-term drawbacks, you're likely to repeat that behavior. That's because your mind is mostly concerned with how you feel right now. And in that sense, the immediate comfort of lighting a cigarette or relaxing on the couch in front of the TV feels more compelling than the adverse health effects of smoking or not getting enough exercise. When repeated regularly under consistent conditions, the behavior becomes automatic and unconscious, and challenging to change. Think of having unhealthy habits as having lost your way. You're on a path that doesn't lead to where you want to go. Your task is to find your way home, to bring your thoughts and actions into alignment with your intentions and your deepest needs. Mindfulness offers a reliable and trustworthy path home. The mindful skills of attention, kindness, and acceptance can help you transform unhealthy habits into a way of being that embodies freedom and inner peace. This book is divided into 2 parts. In Part 1, Chapters 1 and 2, we'll examine how habits form and why they can be difficult to change. You'll see how mindfulness, by bringing what has become unconscious and automatic into the light of your awareness, can provide a unique roadmap to habit change. I'll outline 4 main types of habit. Habits of wanting, craving or seeking food, drink, sex, or any other object of desire. Habits of distraction, checking out from your experience and into something more attractive or exciting, such as social media or TV. Habits of resisting, attempting to distance yourself from things you find unpleasant or difficult. And habits of doing, feeling stressed, always on your way to somewhere else, disconnected from the present. Understanding the brain and how habits form is only the first step. In order to change your ingrained patterns of behavior, you'll need to purposely train your mind to abandon unhelpful patterns of thought and behavior while you learn to cultivate more life-affirming habits. To that end, Chapters 3 through 9 present mindfulness practices and guided meditations to help you let go of unhealthy habits, cultivate more beneficial habits, increase your happiness, and live with more ease. Practitioners have road-tested these practices and meditations for more than 2,000 years and discovered their power to support happiness and well-being. Recent findings from neuroscience confirm what mindfulness practitioners have long known, that mindfulness brings about positive changes in the brain and supports improvements in mental and emotional health. In Chapter 10, we'll examine how unhealthy habits and communication can lead to interpersonal problems, and we'll look at some practices for applying mindfulness to your communications. Then we'll consider ways of transforming harmful collective habits and beliefs that we may absorb unconsciously as members of certain groups in society. We'll conclude with some tips for establishing a regular practice of meditation and bringing mindfulness into your daily life. A note on language. I don't use the term bad habits in this book, because labeling a pattern of thought or action as bad tends to solidify it and imply that it's something you need to rid yourself of or push away. It's more helpful to label habits based on their consequences. If a habit causes harm, as with smoking or addiction to alcohol or drugs, a better term than bad is harmful. If a habit has negative health consequences, as stress and anxiety frequently do, a better term than bad is unhealthy. If a habitual way of thinking or acting isn't necessarily harmful or unhealthy, but you feel it doesn't serve your goals or intentions, a better term than bad is unhelpful or unwanted. Mindfulness invites you to kindly and curiously bring your attention to whatever you're experiencing, thoughts, emotions, urges, impulses, sensations, and to see that these phenomena are not inherently good or bad, but rather impersonal and transient. The key to finding freedom in the midst of challenging and difficult experiences is to meet them with acceptance and compassion. Describing a habit you'd like to change as unhealthy, harmful, unhelpful, or unwanted will support a kind and non-judging relationship to your experience. I invite you to explore these skills and practices and see for yourself. Part 1. Laying the Groundwork. Chapter 1. Understanding Habits. We become what we repeatedly do. Sean Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. You probably consider yourself as a rational being whose life is guided by your choices, plans, and intentions. When you choose to eat something sweet, or check your email, or take a particular route to work, you're doing so because you have made a conscious choice, or so you think. You might be surprised to know that almost half the time, you do what you do because you have done it before under similar circumstances. Researchers have found that between a third and half of all behaviors tend to be repeated in the same physical location every day. In other words, they're habits. Understanding how habits form, why they can be hard to change, and potential ways to transform them is an important step to finding greater freedom and peace. The better you understand habits, and the more you shine the light of your own awareness on them, the more you'll be empowered to bring your actions into alignment with your deepest values. This ability can be a source of freedom and power. What are habits? Habits are behaviors that have developed through repetition over time. They're things you have done so often that you now do them automatically. The philosopher William James wrote 125 years ago, "Any sequence of mental actions which has been frequently repeated tends to perpetuate itself, so that we find ourselves automatically prompted to think, feel, or do what we have been before accustomed to think, feel, or do under like circumstances, without any consciously formed purpose or anticipation of results." Modern science confirms James's assessment of habits. Repetition of an action in a consistent context leads, over time, to the behavior being activated by contextual cues, time, place, feelings, and so forth, rather than by conscious intention. What that means is that the behavior becomes more like a reflex, one that's triggered by where you are, what time it is, whom you're with, how you're feeling, or what you're thinking. In other words, you carry out the action automatically whenever the circumstances seem to fit. At this point, the behavior is no longer linked directly to your intentions or your original goal. You're unaware or only dimly aware of the reason for the behavior, and you may not even be aware of what you're doing. It's as if you're on autopilot. But habits aren't an aberration, some glitch in our evolutionary wiring. Charles Duhigg, best-selling author of The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business, explains habits as the brain's way of conserving energy, allowing our minds to ramp down more often, and points to the evolutionary benefits. An efficient brain requires less room, which makes for a smaller head, which makes childbirth easier and therefore causes fewer infant and mother deaths. An efficient brain also allows us to stop thinking constantly about basic behaviors, such as walking and choosing what to eat, so we can devote mental energy to inventing spears, irrigation systems, and eventually airplanes and video games. Human beings are creatures of habit, and that's not a bad thing, because habits aren't inherently good or bad. Habits typically begin as behaviors undertaken to achieve a goal. For example, you drive to the train station to take a train to get to work. You brush and floss your teeth to prevent cavities and support good health. Or you eat a bowl of ice cream for comfort when you feel lonely or bored. Habit formation is intended to help us be efficient. Think how much more complex and stressful our lives would be if all our everyday activities were the subject of deliberation and decision-making. Driving a car, for example, would be a much more complex and challenging activity if we had to relearn the rules of the road every time we got behind the wheel. Still, sometimes our habits run counter to our long-term goals, needs, and values. It's easy to develop habits that bring you comfort, but don't serve you or don't reflect your deepest needs. Habits may distance you from your own life, or they may prevent you from achieving a deeper connection with your loved ones and the world. They may at times be harmful, unhealthy, and even deadly. The price we pay for unhealthy habits. Following are some common unhealthy habits: eating, drinking alcohol, using drugs, using tobacco, having sex, shopping, overworking, or gambling to comfort yourself or avoid feeling something unpleasant, for example, anxiety, loneliness, or uncertainty. Compulsively or continually checking your messages, going online, or watching TV, which saps your time and energy and causes you to be absent from your life, your family, and the present moment. Acting out angrily in thought, word, or action in ways that cause pain to yourself or others. For example, getting frustrated with staff in stores or on the phone, driving impatiently, sending angry emails, feeling annoyed or angry with family members, friends, or colleagues, or judging yourself or others negatively. Feeling as if you're forever on the go, on your way somewhere, or crossing things off a to-do list. Worrying about the future and imagining negative or scary scenarios. Spending large amounts of time ruminating on the past, how you acted, what you might have done differently, or what people have done to you. Procrastinating, finding ways to put off particular tasks or projects you need to complete. These habits may be causing you suffering and harming others as well. At the very least, they don't serve your needs, your long-term goals, or your deepest intentions. Think of the ways in which a constant need to be online can separate you from your loved ones, or how mindless snacking can leave you feeling judgmental and separated from yourself. Consumerism can keep you locked in patterns that conflict with your deepest sense of what's good for you. Even habits of distraction, like biting your nails or humming or picking your fingers when you're feeling nervous or anxious, prevent you from being fully present for your life, experiencing the passing joys and sorrows in various moments. Roy's story. One of my students, Roy, has quit cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs. But a long-time source of suffering for Roy, one that has been compared to heroin, remains. A craving for sweets, which visits him most strongly in the hour or two before bedtime. Most evenings, Roy eats a large bowl of ice cream or a plate of cookies, even though he's a diabetic, and afterward he feels bad both physically and emotionally. Roy's craving is familiar to many. Michael Moss, in his powerful book, Salt, Sugar, Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us, points out, there are special receptors for sweetness in every one of the mouth's 10,000 taste buds, and they are all hooked up, one way or another, to the parts of the brain known as the pleasure zones, where we get rewarded for stoking our bodies with energy. We'll come back to Roy's efforts to work with his sugar habit in later chapters. In addition to the drawbacks mentioned above, some unhealthy habits have extraordinarily high social costs, as shown in statistics for addictions rooted in unhealthy habitual behaviors. Tobacco use is the leading cause of preventable death in the United States. Worldwide, tobacco use accounts for 5 million preventable deaths a year, some 10% of deaths overall. Alcohol consumption, illicit drugs, and obesity account for an additional 21% of preventable deaths in the United States. Substance abuse and addiction cost more than $600 billion annually, including productivity and health and crime-related costs. Illegal drugs, $193 billion, alcohol, $235 billion, and tobacco use, $193 billion. As staggering as these numbers are, they do not fully describe the breadth of destructive public health and safety implications of drug abuse and addiction, such as family disintegration, loss of employment, failure in school, domestic violence, and child abuse. The incidence of obesity, key causes of which lie in unhealthy eating habits and insufficient physical activity in the United States, has increased from 13% to 34% in the past 50 years, and obesity accounts for $190 billion in medical costs alone. More than 40% of people between 19 and 39 years old say they text while they drive, and 10% say they do so regularly. Driving while distracted by smartphones and other devices caused 3,331 deaths and 387,000 injuries in 2011. In our individual lives, unhealthy and unwanted habits can cause intense physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual suffering. When we act in ways that are out of alignment with our values, intentions, and deepest needs, we suffer. And unsuccessful attempts to change behavior, often caused by lack of awareness of the power of habits and the most effective ways of changing them, can engender a sense of failure, guilt, disappointment, or resignation, helping perpetuate unhealthy behaviors. It's hard to change established habits. Almost all of us, if we look at our lives honestly, have habits and patterns that we would like to change. Have you ever found yourself repeatedly doing something that you know doesn't reflect the best of who you are? Have you ever thought, why do I keep doing this? Perhaps you have made plans or resolutions to kick this habit, but found yourself falling back or relapsing, and then felt disappointed with yourself. Here are some common habits that are hard to change. Eating too much or too often, not from hunger, but to numb an emotion or to feel a sense of comfort. Spending long hours on social media or checking your email, knowing this isn't the best use of your time and energy. Smoking cigarettes, despite the serious health costs. Working long hours as a way of avoiding other areas of your life. Getting caught up in negative or judgmental thoughts about yourself or others. If you develop unhealthy or harmful habits, it doesn't mean you're flawed or that you have failed somehow. You have simply lost connection with your true interests and intentions, possibly mistaking short-term relief from unpleasant or uncomfortable feelings for real happiness and well-being. Intuitively, you might think that once you recognize that a behavior was unhealthy or unwanted and you decide to change it, you should be able to modify your behavior so that your actions and habits correspond with your intentions and goals. But it's not so simple, because there are two separate behavioral systems in your brain. According to Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman, there are two modes of...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?